Good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Whether you like it or not, many don't, many do. The Middle East is hitting world sport like a ballistic missile. Oil-rich states with bottomless pits of cash are spending untold wads of their desert dollars on buying up the games that we love. They're competing furiously with each other. They're transforming sport, and they're just getting started. Qatar ploughed $220 billion into the World Cup. Formula One is in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. Dubai boasts major boxing bouts that would have once been a shoo-in for Vegas or New York. The Saudi-backed Live Golf has just turned that sport upside down. Now it's sensationally merging with the PGA Tour. And next, the Saudis are planning a massive swing into professional tennis. And, of course, they want the biggest sport of all, football. The beautiful game. Well, they're in the Premier League as owners of Newcastle United, and barely a day seems to pass without another major star following Cristiano Ronaldo to the Desert Kingdom for eye-watering sums. But this sporting arms race all began arguably with the UAE. The Emiratis bought Manchester City back in 2008. It's now become the jewel in the Middle East sporting crown. City were a middling club, the ugly duckling of Manchester, forever in the shadows of Manchester United, but not anymore. It's United in the shadows of City. City have spent billions turning City into the champions of Europe. They just beat my beloved Arsenal to the Premier League title. They're seventh under Sheikh Mansour. It's a sore subject for us Gooners, of course. So you might think, perhaps like I do, that there's something wrong with it. And maybe there is. We'll debate that later tonight. But the key question we're asking first is it fair? Was it a level playing field? Did Manchester City actually play by the rules that have been laid down? They've now been charged with more than 100 breaches of Premier League financial regulations. And tonight, we're going to reveal new revelations which will uncover a little bit more about those charges. Well, joining me now is the Times chief sports correspondent, Matt Lawton, to talk us through it, plus TalkTV international editor Isabel Oakeshott, and the former vice chairman of Arsenal, David Dein, and remotely by the Conservative MP and former chair of the Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee, Damian Collins. Well, thank you all for joining me. OK, Matt, tonight the Times is breaking a story which reveals some detail of these charges against Manchester City. What is it and how significant is it?
It's a specific detail which is supported by documents. It's supported by the fact that there is a new film that has obtained a UEFA report that was into City, these allegations of financial doping, if you like, at Manchester City. And specifically, what you've got to do, if you roll back in time, City arrive, these guys arrive and they own City, and they've got so much money, but there are rules that limit how much they can spend it. So the allegations really are around the fact that whether they were using slightly underhand ways to spend the money faster, to close the gap on the Arsenals and the Manchester Uniteds quicker. In this specific case, what we have are two payments of £15 million in 2012 and 2013, so 30 million in total, by a mystery figure. Now, UEFA looked at this person, Yaba Mohammed, and they couldn't actually identify who he was. But what's important about this story is the fact that actually, when it came to it, a lot of what UEFA looked at when they investigated Manchester City was time barred, and they had a 5-year limit. That's not the case with the Premier League, and we're pretty certain that of the 115 charges that City are facing from the Premier League, and that's the thing, when we talk about City winning the treble 2.5 weeks ago, it's hard, you have to still look at it within the context of these charges that are hanging over them. We're pretty confident this will be one of the charges. And this is the kind of thing, just this random money.
And in simple layman's language,
just shoving money.
There's £30 million have come in from this mystery donor who's not an official sponsor.
No.
And who do we think he is? Who do we think he represents?
Well, we think he's not far removed from the, from the people that run the country. So,
and if that is the case, is that a clear breach of Premier League rules?
Yes, because it's not a sponsorship deal. It's not a legitimate sponsorship deal. The point is, when you are City in 2012, 2013, in 2023, they are now the richest club in the world, the most successful. They attract all the sponsorship, they attract all the money because they're winning everything. So everyone wants to sponsor them. But back then, even though they were going to win the title, they're winning their first title. Back then, they're not commanding the sums they need to spend fast. That squad that Pep Guardiola just won the treble with cost the best part of £1 billion to assemble. So you've got to spend that money, and they had to spend money fast to get into a position where they could really
What are the repercussions if they're found guilty of a number of these charges, like the one that the Times is reporting tonight? If they're found guilty, what happens?
Well, the options open to the Premier League are pretty extensive, including relegating them from the Premier League.
Would they remove this recently won Premier League title, and would that automatically go to the club that came second?
Well, unfortunately for Arsenal, the time span of the charges is 2009 to 2018.
But you could argue the whole edifice has been built on what they did in those first few years.
Absolutely.
If that was all done illegally, breaking the rules of the Premier League, it's pretty serious. I mean, David, look, you've been at the forefront of all this, one of the Premier League's great, creators. What do you make of this?
I'm not sure how much of a smoking gun this really is in the scheme of things. And whatever you say, Manchester City, and I'm not here to defend Manchester City, they've done a sensational job, not just for themselves, but for the Premier League.
115 charges.
Understand that, and they've still got to be proven yet, don't they?
No, but only one of them here out of 115 involves £30 million.
As we all know, they're innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
There's a long way to go yet. They'll probably trundle along for the next couple of years in any case. I cannot see them having any titles taken away from them. I think that would be wrong in the scheme of things. But let's see what the argument is.
We're going to come back to I want to come back to the wider debate about this sports washing concept. But let me bring in Damian Collins. So, Damian, what do you make of this whole situation around City and the sort of central charge, I guess, that these 115 charges which they're facing relating to the first few years that they were involved with this big takeover by Sheikh Mansour, if it turns out that they really were masking and concealing vast sums of money, which has then led to them becoming the biggest club in the world, what should be done about this?
Well, there should be some sanction against them, and I think that can't just be a fine which will be irrelevant to Manchester City. It has to be some sort of in-game sanction, and I think these 115 charges aren't a trivial matter. Sometimes when you hear people talking about this, it makes it sound like these are details for lawyers. This is about the integrity of the competition. If clubs are willingly breaking the rules for their own advantage, to give them a competitive advantage within those sporting competitions, there have to be robust sporting sanctions. I think it also shows there has to be proper, robust, independent financial oversight of football clubs as well. I think too much of this takes place within the sport, and also it's too easy for very wealthy clubs to use lawyers to frustrate investigations for years. It needs to be much more transparent than it's been so far.
I mean, the bottom line is that no club should be state-owned, right? But a lot of clubs are already, it looks to me, circumnavigating that. They're sort of setting up entities which are clearly linked to states, and they're getting round it that way. Should we be tightening the loopholes on this?
Yeah, I think that's why we need to have this much-discussed football regulator in the UK, where there's proper transparency of financial records. This isn't just done within the sporting competitions themselves, but actually there's an external body that's got the right to know who are the ultimate owners of the club, where are the funds coming from, are they trading within the financial fair play rules? Because what a lot of fans will feel is a club is bought effectively by a sovereign wealth fund, or a very rich entity. Billions of pounds are pumped in. Now, where's that money going for? How's it being spent? Because it distorts the competition for everyone else if clubs are breaking the financial rules. And what we've got to avoid, I think, is football being owned by a very small number of people who are the only people who've got the resources to buy some of these clubs and operate them in the way they're being run now.
Right. Isabel, let's look at this in a bigger picture of sports washing, this new phrase. I'm kind of torn on it because I think there's obviously a degree of sports washing. Obviously, a lot of these Middle Eastern countries would like to improve their images, particularly the ones like Saudi that have got poor human rights records and so on. And it's right they should be held accountable for the human rights abuses and so on. But it's also true, I've seen it with my friend Cristiano Ronaldo over in Saudi, the amazing impact he's been having on football there, but also the reaction of the young Saudi football fans. They're football nuts over there. And we saw with the Qatar World Cup, teams like Morocco and others, huge support, huge interest in the region. Why should they not be able to go around the world investing in sport that their own people absolutely love? What is intrinsically wrong with that, even if along the way there is clearly an element of sports washing?
Well, as Damian Collins was saying there, it's about transparency, isn't it? And I think you make a very fair point here about the actual impact that it's having back in those countries. And I think, to me, what this shows is the astonishing level in the Middle East at the moment. I mean, several countries that are ploughing huge sums of money into getting involved in sport as part of a kind of whole overhaul of their international image for geopolitical reasons. And the government here has, I think rightly, taken a very pragmatic view of that. You know, taking Saudi Arabia as an example, we basically need them. You know, we
still have arms deals with Saudi Arabia.
40%.
We still buy
40% of our arms.
oil from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
The Qataris own half of London. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy I found around the Qatar World Cup. I mean, Matt, if you come to the way that journalists in this country have covered all this, it's a lot of a sort of angry reaction from British journalists about sports washing and how wrong it all is. But ultimately, if you ask City fans, you ask Newcastle fans, you ask golf fans, who are now going to see their biggest stars in the world come together for some collective competition, whatever it may be. If you ask most sports fans about the huge injections of cash, I don't think they're as morally problematic about it as perhaps journalists here are.
I think we were right, just as you've done it just now, I think we were right to question some of the human rights issues going into Qatar and even before the football started. Particularly when they're confiscating rainbow hats off people and stuff like that, the sort of PR own goals that were happening.
But that's their culture. You know, you can't expect to go into another country and they are conservative.
When England won the World Cup in
countries.
1966, it was actually illegal to be gay in this country.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
yeah,
people
how would we have felt if people had come along with rainbow flags then? They'd have been taken down, they'd have been arrested. So I do think you have to...
Society evolves.
Yeah, but I do think the idea that England in particular takes any high
some
moral
kind of
ground.
moral high ground.
We invaded Iraq illegally, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. Invaded Iraq illegally. Caused mayhem in the Middle East, and yet somehow we think we are morally pure enough to lecture the Middle East about how they should conduct themselves. I've never bought that argument particularly.
I
I think the reporting was balanced because the messaging before the World Cup was that everyone was welcome, and then people were made to feel they weren't welcome. And you know, we interviewed gay football fans out there who didn't feel welcome. Anyway, but
wasn't that because you lot told them they weren't welcome? Because what I found on the streets of Qatar, everyone was having a great time. It was you going up to gay people saying, "Do you feel welcome?" Wasn't it to a large degree?
I would read some of the stuff. But anyway, look, it's...
But on sports washing generally, is there a line between genuine sports washing, which I'm sure they're all trying to do, wash their human rights records, improve their image, but also genuine recognition that they really do want to get involved in sport? And actually, if the sport benefits, like golf, tremendously from grassroots up, from vast injections of cash, do we care?
Look, I live in Manchester and I've been covering the Manchester United sale for 7 months now. The majority of Manchester United fans want the Qataris to win this battle because they just see an opportunity to be back up with the big boys in terms of the spending, in terms of being able to take on what they see as a potential threat, well, a clear threat from Newcastle down the line, but more locally from Manchester City.
Right.
So they want that. I think it is, you know, the horse has bolted. I think they're here to stay. I sat with representatives of the Saudis when I was in Qatar. I sat with the Qataris. They want the World Cup in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They want the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know,
David, let me bring you in.
Happen.
You've done a lot of business around the world, right? We had a nice cup of tea in Qatar, and it was an amazingly well-run World Cup.
The best.
Everyone had a great time. I thought the best. Graham Souness told me it was the best he'd been to. But there are obviously political issues here. You can't divorce politics and sport. Obviously, some of these countries, like Saudi Arabia, have very bad records on human rights. And you can't ignore that in all this. And obviously, they're trying to improve their image. Where's the line for you?
Well, there is a balance. Firstly, how do you stop overseas investment? And it's been going on for years. You take Rolls-Royce cars. Who owns Rolls-Royce? One of the best names in English car manufacturer. Who owns it? BMW. Who owns Harrods, the state of Qatar? Who owns Coleman's mustard, if you like? And that's a hot subject. Who? Unilever of Holland. So you're always going to get overseas investors. Who owns your newspaper, Matt?
I mean,
Australia.
we're not making a huge fuss about the fact that the Chinese have huge stakes in our critical national infrastructure. I mean, that's arguably much more worrying than anything that we're seeing here. And the point you made about the Saudis wanting to get their own people involved, I've looked at their Vision 2030, an incredible plan for how they're going to transform in every little way. And it's from the big to the small. For example, they want to raise life expectancy from 74 to 80 there. They've got very specific plans about how much sport they want everybody to be doing every week.
I think it would behold the UK to slightly reduce our moral high ground on this. Because honestly,
there is something called financial fair play in existence.
Yeah.
So there is a levelling, and it's meant to, and it will work eventually if you put red.
But if these charges against City are true, or even half of them are true, they have trampled all over.
Well, that's another story, and as I say, that's yet to be proven.
You want to mention two quick things before we let you go?
Oh, that's very kind, yes. If we can talk football for 2 minutes.
Oh,
yeah, of course. Always talk football.
So I'm on two campaigns to do with football. One is timekeeping, because you know how long it takes to score a goal, Matt? 4 minute, right, 4-man move. Guy scores, how long does it take?
35 seconds.
10 seconds.
Okay.
So when the fourth official puts up 3 or 4 minutes, is he accurate for the last 10 seconds? No, he's not. I want the time loss. I'm not talking about...
Can't we say 4 minutes and get rid of VAR, which has been a total travesty?
I'm a great believer in VAR, and I think it helps the referees. We're all talking about integrity.
I think he's killed the joy out of football.
Piers, well, we'll have to disagree on that one, because...
Come back another time, we'll debate VAR.
OK, so anyway, I'm on timekeeping. I want to eventually see real time. I want the fans to realise they're going to get 60 minutes of actually pure football.
I think fans would agree. What's the other one?
That's another one. The other one is penalty shootouts, believe it or not. Why is it that the penalties are taken at one end, which has to be a disadvantage to the opposing team? I want to see penalties taken at either end. So let's take the cup final. You have Man City taking their penalties.
So you both take them at your own end or opposition end?
So at least you take it at your own, where you've got 20 or 30,000 fans.
Yeah, but you're depriving me of the joy of watching somebody from Tottenham taking a penalty against Arsenal and 50,000 of us booing at him.
Well, yeah, and
I don't want you doing that.
How does a penalty? How does he feel? How do the fans at the wrong end of the pitch feel when they've got to watch it down the other end?
Well, look,
I'm
as always, you're an innovator. You always have been. That's
you.
why my club's in such a great condition, thanks to you and all you did. So thank you again for that.
Thank you,
Matt. Great story tonight. It's going to be very interesting how this all plays out when we get more details and more of these charges. Isabel, thank you as always for your perspective. If you'd like to watch, and thank you to Damian as well for joining us, Damian Collins over there, I appreciate it. If you want to watch Britain's biggest football scandal, it's available on YouTube now, and it has more of this story about Manchester City.